Imagine, if you will, you're a 15-year-old girl or boy, and you're listening to Taylor Swift. You're in Headphone City. You're sketching. You're enjoying yourself. And then from right behind you, you hear, yeah, and you take off your headphones and you say, "What?" And someone with good intentions says, "Oh my God, you're so talented." And then you say, of course, "Oh, thank you." But in the back of your mind, you're like, "I'm not fucking talented. I'm hardworking. I'm that bitch. I'm amazing." That's how I feel about being called talented. It makes me pissed. It's because I work hard, and it's not some magical gift that was given to me from birth. I earned that shit. And you should feel the same way. When you see other people who are talented, it's probably not a magical gift. It's something that they did, they worked for, they earned it.
Interesting. Well, what a great way to start this episode. So, talent versus hard work, what does it mean? I love the analogy you gave because that really does put everything into perspective, because as artists, we always get that saying like, "Oh, you're so talented. We love what you're doing. Oh, I could never do this. You are just naturally talented, so it's a lot easier for you." And so how does that make us feel as artists? I mean, it's definitely a cliche that has been waved around us a bunch, but you know, there are some people that are like, "Yeah, I'm talented. I don't care. I do what I want," you know? Mm-hmm. So it's like, how do we begin to distinguish between what that feeling is when you put in all this hard work and then there's this incredible product that's created after that, and how the world and society perceives it?
Totally. Well, like I said, it's just something you got to work for, and absolutely, I think it's like you putting yourself between this thing and what you want to do. So when you look at other people, it's almost as if they're a different person. They're incapable. You're incapable of getting to where they are because there's something that they have that you don't have. But really, we're all the same. We're all trying our best, and we're all, getting there.
Yeah. I think that, for a person to have something that you don't, it is where people start to come up with this, "Oh yeah, it's because you're talented, that's where you have it." It's not about that, right? So the thing is, when it comes to art, it's less about talent, especially if you're really good on, obviously it's an opinion, everybody likes what they like, but when you see something that's incredibly powerful and thought-provoking, it's because there's that emotional response to it. And there has been a level of technical skill, or maybe no technical skill. It just, hits that nice little soft spot where you see it and it's like, wow, nostalgia, or wow, life experience. And essentially that is the beauty of art, and that's what it does. It's not just like this form of entertainment and you out the womb start painting like freaking Picasso, right? Like it's none of that. So I think that understanding the distinction between the two is really important. And so I think essentially the way I look at talent is that talent is something that does not exist. It's something that is almost a filler and created within society because there are people that they are discouraged, they are intimidated by what you do, and they don't want to truly understand how you got there, or they don't believe in themselves to even see that they can get there, Like, I think that there's so many roles that we have to fit and play into this life, and some people really do play into that task, and I think that that's limiting. It's limiting, and it makes this construct of talent a reality.
Yeah, and it can be deceiving too, because when you see someone who's really mastered their craft, it seems easy, and that's one of the abilities you have as you get stronger at something. You master your craft, you are able to display it in such a way that seems doable, and it's kind of like, oh, I could do that, but really, if you tried, it's immensely more difficult than it seems to be, and that's, to me, true art, is art that it looks like it just kind of happened during a sneeze. Like, it just happened so quickly, and it's always been this way, and it's always been there. It's just the artist uncovered it. And that's what I'm looking for, even with stand-up comedy. You know that the artist or the comedian, they've done it a million times. They've done the same routine, and as artists, we're going through the same routine. But a really good artist or comedian will make it seem like it's the first time they're saying that joke, the first time they're having this thought, and they're doing it in such a way that's fresh, and it's obviously changing. Every time is going to be a little bit different, but each painting is building off of the last painting. Or if you're a sculptor, each sculpture is informing your next sculpture, and even interdisciplinary as well. Like a sketch is going to inform your sculpture,
Right.
and vice versa.
Yeah. Same can be said for music, right? And so I think that process isn't as emphasized when you see something so incredible, because you're like, wait, like, this doesn't make sense. They have to have been born with this. This had to have been this like innate ability. And it's like, I think we're here to debunk that for you, right? So again, talent isn't something that you're born with. It's something you work hard for, right? But there are certain instances and people that, you know, when it's meant for you, it's there. And when you're in full alignment with what you want in life, then what you create out of that is going to show. So I think that that's another thing that we can totally touch on, right? So how is it that there are people that they work really hard, they bust ass, they do what they need to do, but there's still like that little piece missing when you see it. And not saying that those people are not deserving of that, because everyone's deserving of this great piece of art, this great piece of soul, right? But that soul, and that's what people see as talent, is something that is not only worked hard for, but it's created through somebody's life experience. So how can we begin to describe a person's journey and how that affects, again, what that talent's going to look like?
What do you mean by that?
So essentially, I feel that, you know, there's people that can go through all the schooling, right? They can they know all the right artists, they do everything on a technical level. But then there are, again, those like really rare people that maybe just started painting or drawing or whatever it is they do, like only a few years ago. They've never been through schooling, they're quote unquote self-taught, right? So,
right.
But when you see their work, there's this like really crazy emotional response and reaction, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and this is actually something we were talking about the other day,
Yeah.
not on a podcast, but you know, if you go to school for dance, like you can't teach someone rhythm, you can't teach someone, you know, that's kind of something you're born with, or a talent you might have, but also you can work really, really hard at something, but some people it's going to come more easily to them. They're going to have that ability to dance from birth, and some of it is just how you were raised, but obviously some of it is just, you know, effervescent. It's hard to describe how or where talent comes from, if it even is a thing.
Yes.
But I think it takes many forms, and a definite reminder to people who are, you know, maybe naturally good at something is you have to work really, really hard. It's like the tortoise and the hare situation. If you relax for a moment, someone who wants it more than you is going to take it. So always be improving regardless of where you think you are. And then there's, you know, the other side of the coin, which is people who are all the way down on themselves and aren't willing to recognize and celebrate themselves when they're doing well. And it's really important that even though other people are doing well, to again, celebrate them as well. And when you're looking at a really hardworking artist, just remember that there's countless hours behind the scenes and sketches they've thrown away, things they've done throughout the years that they would never post online. And you know, it's a similar thing to gardening. Like people who have gardening or plant profiles, they're sharing plants, but there's countless plants they've killed as well, and they're not showing the ones that have like a fungal disease on them or something. So just keep in mind that social media is very manicured, and there's a lot going on that isn't being shared. And even though you might think that you can't share that ugliness, I think that it's important to do that as well, and that's something I respect from artists, that I really appreciate. They'll share like, this is something that I hate, or this is something that I actually like put a knife through and cut it. You know, it feels like if you're willing to show the ugly side of your process, then it makes your beautiful work that much more impactful, in my opinion.
It also sounds like it's a personal experience that's had, because the way the world perceives it from the outside doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you truly enjoy. Like, I know that there's some like weird stories of like people that have just been like grandfathered into the art community, and all they want to do is, you know, maybe dance, or they wanted to do something else, but they're just really good at painting this one type of thing, and so people see it as talent, but for them there's still this thing that's missing, and that, I think that also goes back to this kind of alignment thing, right? So when we see artists sharing all these incredible things, we also have to question how connected they are to what they're doing. And I feel that really only we ourselves can identify that connection that we have to the work that we do. And but actually there is this moment that happens, this spark, when you work so hard, or maybe when you fit into these roles, when you step away from that, you look at what you're doing, and then you look in front of you and you're like, actually, I'm very happy with where I'm going with this. I'm very passionate. I feel really strongly about these pieces, and this is something that I really do want to enjoy. And it's not just about how the world perceives me, it's about me wanting to share a piece of my soul with the world. And so if that's talent, then cool. But again, I feel like that's not talent, that's passion, that's spark, that's energy. And I feel like you can tell the difference between somebody that embodies that energy in comparison to like, yeah, I'm talented, yeah, I did this. It's like this almost ego thing that you're walking alongside with.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah. And passion is way more important than talent.
exactly.
And it always will be, especially now that we're not reliant on painting to like capture the world around us. We have cameras, and
Yeah,
we have for a century or more now. So
it's true.
it's no longer about who can paint an apple the best. It's also how does the apple painting make you feel when you look at it.
Exactly. Well, you know what's really funny is I always see these videos there, because you know everything on Instagram is reels nowadays, and I remember seeing this like woman, and she's like throwing like buckets of paint on like this giant canvas, and then you know it's, or I think it was like an older woman, and then you know it zooms in and she's like painting this tiger from the splashes, but then the hand changes to like this young looking hand, and it's so weird the mental gymnastics that go. But like you look at all the comments and everybody's like, oh my god, so talented, so talented, so amazing, I wish I could do that, I wish I could do that. And it's like anybody could do that. You could literally just toss some paint around and like hire some other artist to make this tiger painting, right? So it's like I feel that there's also this level of bringing a societal awareness to questioning the things that we're seeing, right? Because if we really wanted to paint a tiger, anybody could do it. And I know it sounds difficult, like, oh, I couldn't even draw a stick figure, I couldn't even do this. It's like, no, like it's literally just about dedicating yourself to a routine where you're drawing every day, you're showing up, and you're not discouraged by yourself. You're not in this self-doubt and this, I can't do this because I'm not good enough, or this tiger isn't, you know, soulful or meaningful enough. It's like, it's not that. When you come through what you're doing, it shows. And it's a process that takes time. So if you're popular off of just drawing the same tiger, you know, on social media, that's incredible and good for you, you know? But then there's this level of like, okay, what am I going to do to continue to keep this so that my talent isn't just this quote unquote talent, it's my passion, it's my spark, it's what really excites me. I think there's levels that also need to be breached once you are aware of your skill set and like where you lie within an art practice and where you want to be. So
Definitely. And the more you practice, the more and more you'll be able to goof. And even though it's important to draw tigers, maybe you'll feel like you aren't challenging yourself enough. And also the deeper you get into the philosophy of art history, and kind of the academic world with art, I've noticed that some people lose motivation to make art because they're psychoanalyzing all their actions. And it's like, you're not Rembrandt, dog. Like, no one's gonna be sifting through your paintings years from now. It's just about the present moment, and have fun. And I don't think that anyone should be expecting statues or museums to be built for them. I think you should just live a humble life, make art because it feels good, and question marks in the future. I don't think I see enough artists around my age that are making just to make. They're making things for a transactional relationship with the art world, and I feel like maybe there's some magic there that's lost when you're commercially successful and you have to follow up your previous successes with more success, and it leads you down a tricky rabbit hole with AI. We talk about that
Oh yeah, oh my god.
quite a bit, where we see some artists that we really respect, and they're branching out into AI and using that to make facsimiles of their previous work, and still figuring out how we feel about it. I think everyone is collectively figuring out how they feel about AI, and I know it's a touchy subject.
Yeah, I feel like we'll definitely do an episode touching that. Personally, I feel like if you are somebody who is using AI, it could be really resourceful as reference, but don't use it as a crutch because it's not you. It's still this computer generated thing. And you can type in your ideas, but having something else do it for you and then copying it verbatim, it's almost like the hyper realism painters. It's like just put the photograph up there, right? But that's a personal preference of mine, right? And everybody has preferences, and if that's what's working for you, then great. But what you said is it's really interesting. Circling back to that, I feel that you're so right that there is this sort of magic and spark that is missing as you get older in the game, because it is this fucking weird capitalistic thing that, well, I love art, I want to make it full time, but I have to be able to pay my bills. And what ends up happening to a lot of artists is they commercialize themselves so that they can fit into these narratives instead of giving themselves the time to actually do what they're passionate about and what they really truly enjoy. And so the majority of the commercial art world is that. And so people see that and it's like, oh, you're so talented. Oh, I could never do this. Oh, it's this. But it's like, it should not be this elitist thing. It's not like the separation between me versus you. Yes, I learned how to paint this incredible tiger, and now I'm marketing off of selling tiger tapestries and prints or whatever. And that's my thing, and that's my niche, right? But that's not your talent, that's your niche. So it's like, what are you passionate for? Do you wake up in the morning and truly feel inspired? And if making tiger prints and paintings is something that is gonna help you pay your bills, that's incredible, and that's so privileged and such a beautiful thing to do. But then how much time are you also investing in yourself? And so making that distinction between that passion and the talent is extremely important, and that also feeds into the hard work and what it takes to actually get there.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, but I think it's almost better to not have success while you're learning how to make art and become kind of a master in your own rights. How you know, even though obviously I don't think there really is such a thing as a master. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, but I think in a general scope, like if you are really good at one thing, make sure you're working out other muscle groups, and make sure that you're also not overextending yourself in one direction. And something we talked about before is not saying everything in one painting or one art piece. Like always leave a little bit on the chopping block and leave a little bit of yourself withheld. And I think it kind of leaves a nice sense of self. Whereas, you know, I'm obviously emptying out my cup, I'm getting out all my thoughts, and I'm getting everything I need off of my chest. And then once I get it all out, then it's kind of like reeling back in the composition, like what doesn't need to be here? How can I simplify this? And how do I create a more potent message by not revealing some of the truth behind how I feel? And I think that there's a certain mysticism, there's a certain like strength to not saying everything all the time. And as an artist, it can be difficult scrambling for like, how do I express this feeling, or like how do I do this, and there's no one right way to do it. But I think as you're analyzing and how to move forward with your art style, just try to challenge yourself not to go overboard. Like keep it simple, which is obvious, but also don't say everything. Like there's some things that aren't necessary to be said in order to get your message across. And that in itself is a talent or like a skill to work at is not even just the muscle memory of paintbrush strokes. It's also about how you apply the brush strokes and why. And yeah.
But that's your passion, because when you're feeding energy and conviction into what you're doing, there's an intention behind everything. It becomes less about me needing to over explain and define these little things, and the viewer is left to just interpret it for themselves. And that's, I think, when art becomes a visual experience. You're not trying to control people and have them feel a certain way. They already feel that way because it's giving that emotional response. And to create that, I think, yes, it does take time, it takes hard work, but it also takes a level of knowing who you are and what you're trying to share with the world, right? And, you know, I feel like we all, at least the both of us, have the too much gene sometimes where we'll try to oversimplify things, but through just trying to say it all and then realizing it's too much and then dumbing that down just a little bit, there's this simplicity that starts to share and shed light where you can still be complex but have this emotional intensity to it. So I feel like through time, through proper critique, through sharing it and actually getting a real critique, not just like doing something that, you know, and then showing it to your parents, like you drew this shoe and they're like, oh, que linda, like I love it, like it looks beautiful, like you're so talented, my talented baby. It's like, no, like go to somebody who's drawn shoes like 1,000 times, show them that piece, and then see that different reaction where it'll be a calm and calculated response. And from there, you really learn to grow, and it becomes less about the talent. And again, just it's a passion, because if you're able to take that criticism, it's like this level of artistry that you've breached that even some artists can't handle. So it's a level of humbleness too, because you're willing to see, hey, like I'm not there yet, but I have this spark in me and it's fueling my everyday. And when I wake up in the morning, this is what I want to do. And I want to share that love with the world. And that's essentially the role of an artist. It's not just like, oh, I did this cool thing. Boom, bitch. Like, look at my awesome piece. I'm the shit. Like, no, you know, it's not about that. It's like, hey, I'm vulnerable and a human. Look at this piece. Who sees this? Who hears this, you know?
Right. And that leads us back to my original, my goofy skit, but it was, when you're around like people like abuela and they tell you, oh, it's amazing, que linda, like it's not good for you to hear that all the time. And in the same way that like we were talking about people getting jaded in art school, that's also not good to be around only art school people. But there's somewhere in between where you can find yourself settled, where you aren't looking at other people's art and going, wow, they're so blank, I will never be blank. And eventually you'll look at it and hopefully not go overboard, but just say, I can do that, and this is how I would do it. And without picking it apart to the point where it's no longer magical or enjoyable. And by challenging yourself to look at things and not pick it apart and critique it constantly, but also take what you need from it. I think that all these things go into the juggling act that is becoming a better artist. And yes, people can be very hardworking and not very skilled, and it's just all about how you spend your time. So even though you're working at your craft 40 hours a week, you might be doing it in the background while you have YouTube videos playing, or you might be, you know, and it may not be your fault. You might have a 2-month-old and you have to, you know, deal with changing diapers and stuff. So it's not always you're a victim to your mentality, your life. You're able to make the time, but it's also how you spend the time. And regardless what you have going on, there's no difference between any of our abilities. It's just how you spend your 24 hours that you have each and every day.
Exactly. And I think the way you spend your time is extremely important to pay attention to. Like, when you go to the studio and look at the next piece that you're doing, ask yourself, am I doing this because of this initial end point? I'm trying to get this to look a certain way, or I already see how it's going to end. Or are you going into the studio with this uncertainty and you're like, well, I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm just going to have fun and feel it out. And I think that distinction is extremely essential in determining your connectivity with the work that you're creating. Because you're right, like, there's hard work, and you can sit there and you can focus and you can play by the rules and you can do everything that you need to do. You're disciplined and you're in the zone and you're always, showing up, and that's incredible, and be proud of yourself, because some people just have a hard time even just waking up in the morning. And if you're doing that, that's great, but how connected are you to what is in front of you? And how much of an experience are you having besides just doing what's right or getting it done or ticking off a goal on your to-do list, right? Because art isn't just like, oh, I'm going to do this thing today, and then once that's done, I'm going to move on to this next thing. That's so linear, and it actually takes you away from just the spontaneity and the joy that you can get when you're just kind of fluid and you're not really thinking and limiting yourself. And no, you don't have to be a surrealist to apply this. This can go for anything, even if you're a musician, right? I think that a lot of, people in the music scene, when they're just starting out, question, are you doing this because you love the response you get when you play a show and everybody's loving you and you're getting chanted? Or are you doing this because you really enjoy that moment of creation you have with yourself in the studio and the music that you get to play, right? So that means more. And if you're putting yourself in this space where you are developing your craft, then the rest follows. Nothing matters, right? I mean, how many shows do we go to and you support your friends, and what happens after that night, that event, right? You go back and you create work. So make it mean something, make it worthwhile, and an experience that you have within yourself. So no matter what the response is, you're there with what you create and you're happy and you love it, and people, they'll feel that energy, right? It's not something that can even be contextualized, it's just there.
Yeah, you can't teach emotion.
No. Yeah, I mean, it's just like I remember I did this live painting experience when I was younger. And I think when I was younger, I had a very different outlook on what art was. I thought, oh yeah, like create, but you have to get connected and like talk to the right people, because if you don't, nobody's gonna see you, and blah blah blah. And so I would try to put myself out there more often, even as a younger person, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I remember I made this painting, and at the time I was just like, every painting was just like a sob experience, which if you're an artist starting out, it's definitely, if you're trying to figure yourself out, you're gonna cry often. And this one painting did evoke a lot of emotion. And this woman, she went and she saw it and she held her art and she was like, wow, like there's so much emotion in this, so much emotion. And I didn't have to like tell her what it was about. I wasn't like, oh, this is placed here because of this reason and I do this because of this. It was this emotional response, and she felt it, and she cried. And I was like, wow, like I just started painting like 2 years ago and I made somebody cry, and like that's so cool, like I feel that, that's not talent, that's passion. And she felt it, and that's what I'm looking for. It's not just about, oh, I need to be the best artist in the room. Like, I don't care about that shit. Like, I want for people to feel, because that's what life is all about. And it was cool.
I don't have a story to brag about myself making good art, but
Yes, you do.
thank you for listening. I think that is about all I have to say about talent versus hard work. But yeah, definitely make sure you're working on your art. Get back to work.
Wait, real fast. You totally have some great stories where people will be like, "What?" Because you make the most incredible work. And it's like what I like about your art is that it's passion, right? But it's a type of passion that is you allow the art to have a conversation with you. So it's not just like this one-sided thing where you're like, oh, I'm gonna create this because I think it looks trippy. Like, no, like this is like, oh, I'm gonna paint this here and I'm going to let the art speak through me, and that's where the composition's gonna come from. And I think that that's really neat. So.
Yeah, there's a really douchey quote by Salvador Dali, which is, "I don't do drugs, I am drugs," and it's so lame. But yeah, you got to think of yourself as whatever type of drug you want to be, and be that.
Yes.
Be an experience, and try to put that down somehow. Put it into the art somehow.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Please, if you listen on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share the video with your friends. If you are listening on Spotify, please follow us and let your friends know. We are a new podcast and would really love the support from our wonderful artists and art listeners and appreciators. Thank you.
Yep, that would help us out a lot. Thank you so much.